Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. When Risen 3 got announced back in early 2014, I wasn't particularly excited, even though I'm a big fan of this developer studio. Since Risen 2 was really disappointing in my opinion, I just wanted to see another gothic game from Piranha Bytes. But one particular trailer for the game called Back to the Roots really caught my attention. Their idea was to build Risen 3 with the best elements of the original Gothic series and the first Risen game. But did they actually manage to achieve this goal? Well, there is no simple answer to that question, so we're going to talk about all the features that Risen 3 has to offer. How's it holding up in the current year, and should you decide to play it for the first time ever or for another playthrough maybe? Before we get to the video, a quick word from today's sponsor. Opera GX is the world's first browser that's built for gamers and it's entirely free. It has a lot of useful features that are integrated in the browser itself. For example, you can easily see your Twitch notifications from the sidebar and never miss your favorite streamer. You can also check your Discord and basically every major messenger app like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. But this wouldn't be a gaming browser without any actual gaming features. You have the Control tab, which will allow you to limit the CPU and RAM usage that your Opera GX is using, which is especially useful if you don't want to close your browser while you're gaming. So you don't have to worry about the RAM eating monster anymore. But my personal favorite is the GX Corner feature, which helps you stay up to date with free games and the best deals. Opera GX team is manually selecting these games, and more often than not, you will find some great discounts. You can easily select your desirable platform, and besides that you have a release calendar for the upcoming games, which is pretty cool. And last but not least, Opera GX allows you to customize your browser however you want, although I think the default version looks pretty neat. So let's thank Opera GX for sponsoring this video, and if you like what you heard about this free browser, please use my link in the description to download it. Even though Risen 3 continues the pirate theme of the second game, it feels a lot different than its prequel. The tutorial segment of the game begs to differ because you basically start off as a pirate on the ship, fighting another undead pirate of all things. My problem with the pirate theme started with Risen 2 because this game almost completely abandoned everything that makes the first game great. The switch from medieval fantasy setting to pirate fantasy setting felt really weird and unnecessary. And of course, this major theme switch affected the gameplay a lot, and not in a good way in my opinion. Risen 3 definitely fixed a lot of problems that Risen 2 had, even though they were not ready to completely move away from the pirate setting. The main character is the son of the famous pirate and the brother of Patty, the returning character from Risen 2, so you're not playing as the same guy from the first two games. I wasn't particularly impressed with the new main character, especially when it comes to the voice acting. He's always trying to sound like a tough guy, which does work in some dialogue situations, but definitely not all the time.
Come on, we're the children of Captain Steelbeard, the greatest pirate captain of all time. Father would never pass on something like this, and neither will we.
His voice and his looks are not really a good match in my opinion, but then again, some people said the same thing for me, so this can be subjective, I guess. Speaking about the voice, the amount of recorded dialogue in the game is nothing short of amazing, considering the size of the team and the budget of the game. Even though the quality of voice acting is really mediocre in general. But that doesn't mean that you won't find NPCs with pretty good voice acting.
If I speak the incantation and don't return to my body, finish it off.
The game is just really inconsistent with the quality of voice acting. That's probably the best way to describe it. Almost every NPC you meet will have more than a couple of dialogue options, and depending on the situation, they will have different things to say. You can also expect a lot of skill checks in dialogue, which I know that a lot of people will appreciate. Extensive dialogue options has always been a huge feature in Piranha Bytes games, so if you played any of the previous titles, this won't come as a surprise to you. What I really like about this dialogue system is the stuff that you can learn from just talking to NPCs. And I'm not talking about the dialogue lines that are directly connected with some quest that you're doing. More often than not, NPCs can give you a lot of tips, and that can prove useful if you pay attention.
Mason is a man not to be trifled with. He's a real tough guy, and highly respected among the demon hunters. But, and you didn't hear this from me, he's tough on the outside, but soft on the inside.
But what about the story itself? The main character is the son of the pirate called Steelbeard, and in the beginning of the game he had a dream about fighting the ghost of the pirate Captain Crow, who was a major character in Reason 2. After you wake up, you find out that you're actually on a mission to find some hidden treasure with your sister Patty. This whole section is basically a tutorial, but it sets up the main story of the game quite nicely. Right after you land on this island, you get distracted by the skull cave that rose from the ground and the shadow creatures that emerged from it. At the end of the tutorial, a Shadow Lord spawns from the demonic gate and he steals your soul, leaving you dead on the spot. Patty buries you, but shortly after that, a shaman named Bones raises you from the dead. He explains that even though you're alive, your soul is still trapped in the underworld and every single action you do from now on will have great consequences. This basically means that if you act as a jerk, you will start losing soul points. But if you decide to be a good guy, you will gain soul points. There is a dedicated bar in the menu for this mechanic, and it's very similar to Cold Meter from Elex if you're familiar with that game. The amount of positive or negative soul value that you have will affect your interaction with certain NPCs and crew members. That's probably the most important thing that you should know about this mechanic. Right after you get rescued by Bones, your mission is to retrieve your soul and fight the shadows. This is where the game opens up and gives you all the freedom that you would expect from an open world game. The main story is the last thing that kept me playing this game, to be honest. Actually, I can say the same thing for a lot of RPGs that I love playing, so it's not a huge problem for me, I guess. I definitely wanted to see what happens next, because it's not a really predictable plot, but I just wasn't heavily invested in the main story. However, I liked most of the quests that the game had to offer, and all three factions in the game are pretty interesting and unique. And that's actually a huge feature in this game, so let's talk about that. There are three major factions in the game: Demon Hunters, the Guardians, and Voodoo Pirates. Just like in Elex, you can play the game a lot before joining a faction. You will find tons of quests right from the beginning, and you should take your time before you decide to join a faction. A lot of quests in this game can be solved in multiple ways, and that's one of the things that I always liked in Piranha Bytes games. And the fact that you can actually fail some quests is also a great thing in my opinion. You won't have a shortage of quests even before joining a faction. There are simple side quests that can be described as fetch quests, but even those are fairly interesting because they usually have a decent amount of context. But you will also find a lot of interesting and unique side quests. And just like in Elex and the old Gothic games, some of the quests can be finished without even having them in your quest log or talking to the quest giver. I always thought that this is a great design decision because it's immersive and it makes sense. It gives you the feeling that the world is not oriented around the player. Joining a faction is definitely a major decision because you won't be able to switch factions. Each faction has different gameplay benefits, and if you want to experience everything that the game offers, you will have to do at least 3 playthroughs. Not just because of the different gameplay options, but because of the story as well. I think this is a great design decision for multiple reasons. You have meaningful choices and consequences which will affect the whole game, and of course you have a strong reason to replay the game multiple times in a different way. But this won't mean much to you if you don't like the game. Now let's talk about the combat. Like I said in the beginning of the video, Reason 3 feels a lot different than its prequel, and that's mainly because of the combat. Not because it's an entirely different experience than Reason 2, but mainly because of the faction exclusive skills and abilities. Piranha Bytes games are kinda notorious for their clunky combat systems. Reason 3 definitely improved the general feel of the combat, but it still had some problems that a lot of people could find annoying. You start off by learning the basics of the melee combat. The simple combo mechanic works pretty good. You have a couple of hits that you can chain together, and between any attack you can hold the same button to charge the attack for more damage. Besides that, you also have a gun that you can mix in your combo as well, and you can dodge and block attacks. That's pretty much it in the early game, before you start learning new skills and faction exclusive abilities. Reason 3 doesn't have a stamina system or any other resource like a mana bar, which means that all spells in the game work on cooldowns. This is a solid foundation for the combat, but it's not without its flaws. First of all, let's talk about the good stuff. Executing your combo feels really smooth, as well as switching your targets in fights. You can switch between enemies seamlessly with each attack in the middle of the combo, and it feels like you're dancing in fights. I actually really like this, and I wonder why they decided to completely abandon this mechanic in Elex. It's really not easy to switch your targets in this game. Another great improvement that's nowhere to be found in Elex is spell animations. Risen 3 have some great animations for spells, which makes them really satisfying to use. No matter which faction you decide to join, you will have a vast amount of things that you can use in combat. And switching between weapons, tools or spells is also really seamless with the action bar. There is a strong sense of progression when you start learning a couple of things from the faction of your choice. And each faction will heavily affect your gameplay style. For example, I'm playing as a demon hunter in this playthrough, and instead of a regular dodge, I get a short range teleport. But of course, there's a lot more than that. There are spells with multiple firing modes, so for example you can use them in a combo or select a long range firing mode. That's a great game design in my opinion. In order to progress your character, you will need glory points, which you can get by killing monsters and doing quests. You need glory points to increase your stats in order to learn different abilities. However, faction related spells can only be learned by acquiring a specific resource. For example, if you're a demon hunter, you will need to spend ancient knowledge in order to acquire spells from trainers. And this encourages exploration. You will want to explore every part of each island. Exploration by itself is pretty good and enjoyable, even though I think Risen 1 and GOTY games did a better job when it comes to this. The exploration in Elex was much better as well, in my opinion. It might be because Risen 3 has a disconnected world with a couple of different maps. It also kinda lacks in terrain variety, even though they did their best to make these islands look unique. But back to the combat. You will have a decent amount of different enemies to fight throughout the game, but this is where you run into some problems. I have no issues with human-like NPCs that will attack you with a weapon. Those kinds of attacks are well telegraphed for the most part, and you can learn to block, parry or avoid them. But certain enemies in the game, like some monsters, have really unpredictable and hard to avoid attacks, forcing you to keep your distance and use ranged attacks only. It's not a huge problem for ranged builds of course, but if you're playing as a melee character it will be a pain in the ass. What makes these fights even worse is the unreliable dodge mechanic. Since enemies have attacks with auto-aim basically, it can be really hard to avoid hits by dodging. This is especially frustrating when you're fighting monsters and beasts. Learning how to parry hits is a much better option, and I think this skill should have been unlocked right from the beginning. This could have been the best combat system that Piranha Bytes ever made, if not for these issues. The lack of combat resources like stamina and mana bar was a good design decision. It gave the gameplay a certain amount of smoothness all around, and that's the word that you won't hear a lot when it comes to the combat in Piranha Bytes games. Especially not in Elex, which is far from smooth. There are some mechanics in the game that felt underdeveloped, like using shotguns and muskets. It seems like guns reload automatically because there are no reloading animations, you just aim again. Risen 3 is the first Piranha Bytes game that started paying a lot of attention to followers. Bones is the first follower that you meet, and he has a lot of dialogue lines for basically every situation.
Interesting shipwreck. I wonder how many sea miles it's traveled.
But all other followers are like this as well. When you have conversations with different NPCs, your followers will almost always have something to say. All of them have a specific quest that you can do, and of course they can help you in fights. Bones is really useful, especially in the beginning of the game, because he can heal you. Your combat experience will also depend on the difficulty you choose, obviously. Lower difficulty settings can save you a lot of frustrations, but I like to play on the hardest difficulty. Probably because I like hurting myself or something, I don't know. Higher difficulty settings can be frustrating because of the problems I mentioned, but the game is not extremely challenging, even on the hardest difficulty. The itemization in the game is done pretty good. All factions have unique looking armor sets, and it feels really good when you progress enough and get to wear a cool looking armor set. You also have slots for amulets, rings and earrings. Your left hand is reserved for weapons like pistols and throwing weapons. Right hand is obviously for primary weapons, but you can use the hotbar to change the weapon or spell of your choice, so you don't have to enter this menu. When it comes to the visuals, what you see is what you get. It does look outdated, especially when it comes to the character models. If you can handle that, everything else won't be a huge problem. Risen 3 as a whole package is a pretty mediocre RPG with a lot of content. If you can handle the issues I mentioned, you might have a lot of fun while playing this game. You can easily spend more than 100 hours if you want to see all that the game has to offer. It's a AA RPG from a small team, so you should know what to expect. It's not the worst game from this studio, but it's certainly not their best one. For the price of $15 on Steam, it's really hard not to recommend it if you like action RPGs. And that would be all for this video. Tell me your opinions about Risen 3 in the comments below. If you liked the video, pressing the thumbs up button would mean a lot. Don't forget to subscribe for more content and click on the bell icon so you don't miss any future uploads. Special thanks to my Patreons, and if you as well want to become one of them, all the links are in the description. Patreon is definitely the best place to directly support my work, and every contribution is highly appreciated. That would be all, and I'll see you in the next one.